All right, I'm going to pass it over to Jonathan.
Hello, everyone. I definitely need to take a deep breath because I was, tech issues. I was on but could not hear anyone. So I am happy to be here with you today. And so before we get into nitty-gritty stuff, I want to take us all to just take a deep breath. A lot going on for everyone, for personally and professionally, and for those that we serve. We're going to be having lots of discussions about what summer reading looks like in the context of everything that's happening. But before we get into, talking about what kind of programming we're going to do and how, if we're going to be doing virtual programming or whatever it is, we need to just take a step back and think about meeting the needs of the people that we serve. Just the basic needs, because, there is a lot happening, and, we have to think about those basic needs first. So on the right, you'll see, and many of you are probably familiar with this. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so, the bottom being the most basic needs: water, food, shelter, moving up to security, employment, resources, and those, a lot of, again, for some of you, some of your family members, and certainly patrons and young people that we serve, those things are not necessarily set at this point. So before we are thinking about things that might be in the top part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need to really think about how we can help meet those basic needs. So that's kind of where we want to start the conversation. And those sorts of things are, again, really thinking about how to bring a sense of normalcy. There's a lot of, this is tumultuous times. Anything that we can do that is sort of like consistent and to say, like, we're here, we're okay, we hope you are too, we're touching base with you, those kind of things. Can make sure there's psychological needs, safety, any way we can participate with be involved in the community, making sure that those basic needs are met. Sharing relatable content that connects to interests and connects to like what's happening right now. Because there's so much content out there, that really to be thoughtful about what you're creating, whether it's a video or a program, and why, because there are a lot of things that are already out there. And again, there's a lot of static and a lot going on. So to be thoughtful about why you are doing what you're doing and what the outcomes are, before just creating a video because that's what you think you should do during these times. And then, engage young people in working toward outcomes that enhance their self-efficacy, esteem, knowledge of the world. So again, that's sort of like towards the top of that, but we have to really think about the basic needs first, and ways that, as part of the community, that we might be able to assist in those basic needs, because these are strange times. So summer reading is going to happen, but it's going to look different, and that's okay. And we have to meet people where they are, and we have to assess where we are too. So just before getting into everything, and again, this will sort of lead into our continued conversations that we're going to have in our webinar, the beginning of May 4th, our summer reading webinar. So just some things to think about.
Thank you, Jonathan. Oh my God. Hang on one second.
Ooh, more tech fun.
Yeah, so my sound is not working, so I had to call in, and now I'm echoing.
Oh, okay.
Your echo is
Okay,
resolved.
so I'm just going to try and do it like this. Okay, so I didn't hear a lot of what Jonathan said because I was trying to deal with my sound. But yes, agreed with everything. You will have access to the slide after the fact. So thank you, Jonathan, for that. All right, so considering everything and how crazy it is, we went back and looked at the grant program and tried to figure out how we could make things more flexible for everyone, and take as much of the stress out of this as possible. Because we have the money and we still wanted these programs to happen, so we decided we wanted the program to continue. The performers that y'all hire every summer really depend on this income, so we wanted to have this program, so we wanted to make it as easy as possible. So let's talk about some of the changes for this summer. So last year and in the many previous years we've done this grant, the performance period was from June 1st to August 31st. In 2020, it's still going to start on June 1st because this is really a summer program. And even if you are starting summer reading early, there are tons of things going on during the school year from publishers, from authors, and once school ends, those things are probably not going to be as available. But that's where you guys come in and start doing some of this program. So we'll still start on June 1st. However, the performances may be held until October 15th. We are hoping that it will be safe for people to congregate in the next couple of months. So if you don't want to do a virtual performance, you will still have the option to do an in-person performance. But if it doesn't happen till August or September, you're still covered. So that's the first major change. The second major change, I wouldn't say that virtual performances were not really an option before. It just wasn't even on the table. But for this year, it definitely is on the table. You may host a virtual performance on social media, via any open platform that people can easily access, working with your performer to do so. And we'll talk a little bit about those requirements later, and some of the pros and cons of doing that and some of the potential issues that you may encounter. The next major change is that grant monies usually have to be spent by August 31st, which is the last day the performances can be held. This year, since performances can be held until October 15th, the grant monies do not have to be spent until October 15th. So that's pretty typical. The timeline makes sense in that regard. And then usually reporting is due by September 30th. In this case, reporting is not going to be due until November 15th. So you'll have about a month until after the performance period ends to report on your performance. The reporting document is very simple, and we'll take a look at it later. So that should be easy peasy for y'all to do. You'll remember that summer reading statistics are also usually due by September 30th, and that's something that Jonathan and I and some of our other colleagues have been talking about too. And I think we'll probably talk about that a little bit more in the May 4th webinar. But don't worry about statistics for September 30th. That may not be the case, but we will see how that pans out. All right, let's keep going. All right, so the biggest change for this year, virtual performances. We are allowing them. We have come up with some guidelines for this. There are some that are kind of non-negotiable, and then there are some that are negotiable. So I'm going to go through this slide, and I still hear myself echoing in my phone, but if any of my colleagues want to jump in, just please do, and I'll figure it out eventually. So let's get started. All right, just like you would for in-person performances, virtual performances should be held live at the agreed upon time and date as decided by you and your performer. You can record the performance if you want to while it is going on live, but typically that's up to the performer. Some performers don't mind and some performers do. So that will be something you'll have to work out. What we don't want folks to do is like buy the rights to show some previously recorded performance. We want something that is live, that is created specifically for your library, because, you know, there's a lot of competition out there with things already on YouTube to watch and a variety of other platforms. The thing that's really going to draw people to your virtual performance is that it's tailored to them. And it mentions people they know, it has spaces that they know, and that's going to really be the big draw. So it should be a live performance, and then you can record it if you want to.
Yeah.
The next guideline for virtual performances is that they must be held on a platform that is free for patrons to access. YouTube, Facebook, some others that we're going to talk about in a second. So patrons should not have to pay to view the performance or download any software that may be needed to view the performance. And ideally, they shouldn't have to download any software at all. We are trying to mimic the environment of an in-person performance as much as possible. All grant performances have to be free, so it should be totally free for people to view, you know, if they have the internet access to do so. And of course, that's a problem that we're dealing with statewide. And libraries have been responding to that just so awesome. So that's something to keep in mind because we want to make this as accessible as humanly possible. The next is a negotiable requirement. Virtual performances should be given by performers who live in Vermont or bordering states or provinces, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New York, Quebec. We want you, even though you may decide to go with the virtual performance, we want you to try and support the same performers that you would have supported if you had done an in-person performance. Like I said, we get emails from performers every summer saying how thrilled they are to be part of this program, how much they love going to your libraries, and a lot of them really depend on this as part of their yearly income. So if you could, you know, try and stick with the same folks that you would have gone with anyway, that would be great. However, ultimately, the choice of which performer you hire is up to you. Just keep in mind that some performers are not very conducive to virtual performances, may have no experience doing that kind of thing, so it just might not work. And if you want to have that performer, you may have to take the chance of pushing it back and trying to have it in person. The next guideline is a non-negotiable. It's something I talked about at the beginning. The performance must be geared towards youth and families. That has always been the case throughout all the years that this grant has been going on, and that is still the same. The money where your grant comes from is from a fund that is for youth and families. So that will always be that way. And then the final requirement suggestion is about advertising. So virtual performances need to be heavily advertised. I mean, just as your in-person performance would, but you need to start pretty early. You need to have people see your posts a bunch of different times to get it into their head. So you should start to advertise your performance at least 2 weeks before it happens. And we also ask that you submit your date, performance date, the time, performer description, and the access information to us at the Department of Libraries. We are going to be creating a calendar where we will list all of the virtual performances that are going on across the state, so that anybody in the entire state with the access to the platform that you ultimately decide on will be able to view and attend. And we think that's one of the big pros of the virtual performances, is that you can get an even wider audience that you would have had before. We will also put in-person performances on that calendar if you want to submit, but obviously it's a little bit different with transportation and all that kind of stuff. I am going to stop listening to my echoey voice for a second and give a chance for my colleagues to hop in if they have any other thoughts.
Yeah, this is Jonathan. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, so I just had a couple things to add to this. Again, this is all new stuff, and especially for you and for the young people you're working with, and for the performers. And it's going to be a little bit, if you're trying to figure out how to do these virtual performances, it's, we don't know exactly what those are going to look like necessarily. So if it is completely overwhelming, again, there are options at this point to, there are a lot of things unknown right now, but if you feel like you want to just hold out for a in-person performance, that is absolutely, something that you can do. And really, I think working with the performer, and if you wanted to do this option, really talking to them about what this would look like, and it may look very different than what their normal performance would look like done in this manner. But I think working with them and seeing what they're comfortable with is really important, and just knowing that we're all figuring this out together.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. This is take all of this with a grain of salt when it comes to this virtual performances. Like Jonathan said, this is all very new. We're not exactly sure what it's going to look like, and we're all doing the best we can. So thank you. All right, skipping ahead. I'm going to invite my colleague Josh to hop on and talk about some of the platforms that you might consider if you want to do a virtual performance. There are pros and cons for each, and he's a lot better at talking about those than I am, so I'm going to pass it over to him.
Hi, thanks everybody. All right, so let's see. So basically, for doing putting out a virtual presentation, you have a number of options. First off, if the performer already has something that they want to use, that's probably fine. If they're already comfortable with something and it's a thing that you are able to disseminate it to the public, that's great. You can just use whatever they want to do, and then you don't really need to get involved in that piece, in the sort of production piece. If they don't have something that they've used before, and that's certainly going to be a possibility with some people because this is going to be new for everyone, there are a few options, and again, if there's one that you're already comfortable with, that's a good one to start with. If you're using one for programs already, or if you're using one even just for meetings, there's a good chance that you just want to stay with what you're familiar with. But if you don't have, if it's sort of a blank slate and you're just looking for options, here are sort of the general options that we see out there. And I'll try to go through them fairly rapidly. But the basic ones are, and for anybody who can't see it, the options that I sort of suggest are YouTube, Facebook, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or Cisco WebEx. So first off, YouTube. On the patron side, YouTube is sort of the easiest because everybody's familiar with YouTube. You just give them a link, and they go there, and they watch the video. So that's great. It is a free option. Getting, from your end, getting YouTube working, it takes a little bit of work. If you don't already have a YouTube channel, then you need to sign up for one and then broadcast from that. It's not wildly difficult, but there are some steps to jump through. And then in terms of interaction with the audience, it's fairly minimal. People can comment is basically all they can do. And YouTube comments are not the most engaging thing in the world, I'll say. But again, so there's some things to be said for that and some things against it. Facebook, if you're already using Facebook a lot, if Facebook is where you do a lot of your social media, Facebook's probably a really good option, is frankly it, because you already have a built-in audience and you may or may not already be familiar with what you're doing there. So for people to get to Facebook, they either go to your Facebook page, which is easy, or you can give them a link. And if you give them a link, depending on what settings you've used for like privacy, for what kind of post it is, they don't need to have a Facebook account, which is great, is sort of ideal. So you're not blocking anybody out. So that's good. In terms of price, Facebook is free, so that's also a plus. And in terms of interaction, people can comment, and they can also make little emoji reactions. And I think that there's a little more interaction than with YouTube. And also, it just sort of, if it's on your Facebook page, it just sort of sits there from then on. So if people come and look at it afterwards, they can see the comments that everybody had. So I think there's a little bit more interactivity with Facebook. Next up, Zoom. So the next three, actually, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Cisco WebEx, are particularly relevant if you want to have more of a back and forth. If you really want significant interaction between yourself and the audience, then they're probably going to be a better fit than YouTube or Facebook. If that's not important, they may still be a good choice, but they can be a little more complicated. So I'll jump through them relatively quickly. Zoom, which many of you may be familiar with at this point, either through personal use or through the news. All the patron needs is they'll take a link and then they will do a very small install program. And this is just a little sort of helper program that lives in the browser. All the next three options have a little helper program like this to some degree. And it's not a lot of work. I don't know if you've used Zoom before, you know the process, and it's pretty quick. Let's see, interaction. So Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Cisco WebEx are all in this case. Patrons, depending on how you have it set up, patrons can chat with you, like we're doing in Skype. They can use voice, so you can talk. They can talk, and you can hear them if you let them, and they can share their cameras if you want them to. You have to, yes. So you have to. You sort of want to be mindful of what you want to let people do. Obviously, Zoom in particular has had some security issues lately that you may or may not have heard of, and it can be a little bit challenging when you're doing a public broadcast, because you want everybody to get there. You have to give the information publicly or they can't get to it, which means if there was somebody who wanted to be malicious, then they would have the information. So it's often a good idea to, at the minimum, prevent them from sharing their screens or sharing their camera, and possibly even from sharing their voice. And this is true of all three of the next options. Zoom. Okay, so cost. This is the first one. Zoom has a free option, but it is limited. Its limit is that it's a 40-minute time limit. In some cases, they will get rid of the 40-minute time limit, but you don't know if they're going to get rid of it. From my understanding is it's when network usage is low, which tends to be at night, which tends to be not when libraries are doing programs. But so you may start a thing and you may get more than 40 minutes, but you might, if you want to be sure of getting having no time limit, you have to pay the Pro account, which is $15 a month. So that's Zoom.
Oh, Josh, can I just jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
This is Glenna. I use Zoom, and the $15 a month package is limited to 100 participants.
100 participants. Thank you very much for saying that. Yeah. So there are a few participant limits in this, and I didn't write those up, but I should make sure that I have those. But if you are looking at going more than, they usually kick in at around 100 people. So if you're thinking you're going to have more than 100 audience members, which is certainly possible statewide, you'll want to be mindful of that. But I'll try to see if I can get some more hard numbers on the other ones. Microsoft Teams is basically an evolution of Skype. It is Microsoft's newer version of Skype. We're actually going to start using it for our webinars pretty soon. So it's not too dissimilar from Skype. Patrons, you would, again, same deal, you would give them a link, and then they would have to install a little mini program depending on what browser they're using. In some cases, if they happen to be on Chrome or Internet Edge, Microsoft Edge, they don't need it. But in any case, pretty similar process. It has all the same functionality that Zoom does. You can, people can share if you want them to, can share their cameras, voice, and chat. And it is temporarily free. So Microsoft said, okay, everybody can have this for the time being. The time being is until January. So you can pay for it. There are what they call freemium options, which I don't think are a good fit for broadcasting things. But for now, you can get it until January if you're so inclined. And then last but not least, Cisco WebEx. WebEx is a lot, you may have had webinars with WebEx. It's a lot like GoToMeeting, basically. Same situation. Patrons would get a link and then would install a little program. Patrons could, if you allow them, share their camera, voice, or otherwise can just do chat. And Cisco WebEx is temporarily free for the time being, but at some point it will probably stop being free. So those are the platforms there are other platforms out there. Those are just the ones that seem like they are the most likely options for libraries. And I'll just briefly, on a technical perspective, in order to do this, you need either a smartphone or a computer that has a webcam and some kind of mic. And I guess by this I mean the performer needs to have this, because unless they're coming into your facility, they're going to have it. In general, as always, the better your equipment, the better the sound and video will be. So if you have a low-grade webcam, people won't be able to see you as well. If your mic is a little bit dodgy, people won't be able to hear you as well. You definitely want to test this beforehand. I'm sort of emphatic. You want to make sure you do a full run through whatever platform, whatever equipment you're using. You want to do it some other time, test it, make sure that you can connect, make sure you're getting good sound and that you're happy with everything before you do it. So that is basically the short version of platforms.
We have two questions, Josh.
Thank you.
The first question is, if you are using Facebook Live, do you have to give the performer admin privileges to do a live stream?
Ooh, we've wrestled with this before. I think you might. Ooh, that would be problematic. Let me see if I can figure that out. I think the previous time we were trying to do it, it was back when we were all going to be in the same space, so it wasn't going to be a big deal. But I think you have to at least give them, they have to be able to come in on an account. So I think you might have to temporarily make them a user on your Facebook page. And then you could, afterwards, you could remove them as a user. But I think that they're going to need that in order to get it up and running. That's my sense. But I'll double check and make sure that my understanding of that is correct.
Awesome. And then the second question is, what about Skype? Do you have any reasons for using or not using Skype as compared to the others?
Yes, absolutely. So if you have access to Skype for Business for some reason, and some of you might because the town might have it, or you might have the whole Microsoft suite. If you have Skype for Business, it works a lot like Microsoft Teams. So if you're already using it, I think you should feel comfortable with that. From my testing, the free version of Skype doesn't seem like you have a ton of control over if you're doing meetings. That was my sense from playing around with it, that you don't have as much. It's just not as good a fit for a kind of large broadcast meetings, the free version. That's my sense. If you have a different sense, then definitely let me know. But again, yeah, that would be my. If you have Skype for Business, it's a lot like Microsoft Teams, and I think it's a fine solution. If you have free Skype, my experience was it was a little iffy on control.
And then we have another question, which is there a time limit for a Facebook Live performance? And
I'm pretty sure there isn't. I think you could just run them basically indefinitely. I'll double check on that, but my understanding is that you could do it quite a while. But
I think, yeah, that's my understanding too.
But if I find out something different on either of those before the end of the meeting, I'll put it in the chat, and if it's after the end of the meeting, we'll send it out along with everything else.
I have a
and then there's a question, is there a user limit on Facebook? There's no user limit on Facebook. It's, it's just going to be live streaming on your Facebook page. So people aren't going to have to log in or anything. So it's as many people who can view your Facebook page at one time, which is pretty much infinite. So no, there is no user limit for Facebook.
I think we had a voice question somebody was asking. Did I hear someone? Maybe I'm mistaken. I'm sorry.
So I might be echoing again.
Oh, I might have caught. Anyway, sorry, that might have been it.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. That's really helpful, and we will keep compiling more information about all of these platforms. Also, info about these platforms is widely available online, so it won't take much Google research to just answer some of these basic questions. So I highly recommend that you do that and see which is best for you. And of course, if you do have any questions that you just can't figure out, please reach out to us and we can help.
Absolutely.
All right. So before we jump into a discussion of the paperwork, are there any questions about any of the content we have discussed so far? If it's a big picture, long involved question, let's save that till the end. But if there are any little questions, we can answer those now.
I do quickly. A really
all right.
question.
So one question that just came up. You have had a list of performers. Will you, or do you have a list of performers who are definitely willing to do virtual performances? So in the past, we've had a catalog of performers that have applied to be in the catalog, and those are the performers that you had to choose from. We do not have that this year. We didn't have it last year. We have a database of performers that you can look through who are fairly local. We have not reached out to them about whether or not they are willing to do virtual performances. That is something that you will have to ask them when you are thinking about who to hire. We can't, don't have the capacity to reach out to every single performer right now and sort of ask them all those questions. So that's something you guys will have to do during your research. When I send out an email after this webinar, which will have the PowerPoint and all of that kind of stuff, I will link to the database, but it is on our website. It's linked on our website already. In terms of reportable statistics, if there's a virtual performance, how will we get numbers in attendance? So this is a great question, and we are going to touch on it when we look at the reporting document. So stand by for that. This is something that we've also been struggling with as we discuss this. So stand by for that. And then Bree says, your local access TV station might be able to help with filming if you contact them. I know LCA TV made that offer to us for storytime filming or other programs. It's a great suggestion. And during our youth services webinar, was a website linked on how to find your local access TV station. So I can also put that link in the follow-up email I send out. Thank you, Bree. All right, so let's, we're about 20 minutes left. So let's hop into grant paperwork. One more question just came in. What happens if you book a live performance later in the summer and it doesn't happen because of state regulations at that time? So if that happens, the only consequence is that you would just have to return the $200 to us. There will be no penalties or anything like that. These are crazy times right now, and everyone has the best intentions going in. But if you don't end up hiring anyone and spending that money, all you have to do is send it back to us.
But also keep in mind that you do, if you have to push it back even beyond summer, we have pushed the deadline back to October. So that's, I know that it's like not ideal because it's not then going to be summer programming, but that is also a possibility.
Bree says, does a virtual author visit count as a performance? We would have to talk about what it would look like exactly. We have had authors who are also storytellers do performances, and we've had cartoonists do workshops. I would say that just an author answering questions about their work and talking about their work is not really a performance per se. There would have to be some sort of storytelling element or interactive element, I would say. But email us when you have a better idea of what it will look like, and we can kind of talk about that.
Yeah, but I think it absolutely could be with that interactive feature, and that a lot of authors are already equipped and know how to use all the various platforms and technology. So I think that in that way, that could work well.
Yeah, we just have to make sure that it's still a performance. We want to stay as true as possible to the original intent of the grant. But considering everything that's going on, there will be some leeway that we have with these sorts of things. So we are really not counting anything out at this time. Just check with us beforehand. All right. Let's hop into this grant paperwork. So I'm going to invite Susan Whitney, who's our contracts and grants administrator, to do this part. I'm going to be pulling up these documents onto the screen, and then she will kind of talk you through them. So all grant recipients who accept the grant, obviously, are going to get a grant package. And the first thing in that grant package will be a memo, which sort of explains everything and says congratulations for the grant, all of that sort of stuff. In that grant package, you will have forms for your records and forms that you'll need to return back to us. Before we get to the specifically VTLIB generated forms, let's start with one thing that all grant recipients have to file with us, which is a W-9 form. So I am going to pull that up now. Let's see. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So this is a W-9 form, and I'm going to hand it over to Susan.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Susan, and thank you, Jennifer. So I work in the business office, so I deal with all the boring stuff, the paperwork. So as part of the package, we'll need a recently signed W-9 form, and that'll come from the library generally, but you want to think about if your library is a department under a town, then it'll actually be the town signing off on your W-9 form. So if you have any questions on that, you can check in with your town clerk, and you can also check in with me because I can look it up in our vision system and let you know if you're under your town or not. So that's a W-9 form, and those are important to fill out and include because you'll end up being taxed on the grants.
Hi, sorry. When I was answering a chat question, I got out of the window that has all of the documents in it. Let me get back into this. Is somebody else, Josh, if you could watch the chat so I can
yes, we'll do
this again. Let me see.
And I think the sound cut out for a second too, Susan, so you might want to repeat
Okay.
the last sentence. Sorry.
All right. Susan, do you want to go through the W-9 more or no? Oh, I think she might be muted.
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we can scroll down through. It's just filling out for the name of the library. On the 1 and 2, if you would fill out the name of the library, but then if you're under your town, under number 2, you would put the town name in. And
I think it's the other way around, isn't it?
oh, correct. Sorry about that. Yes. So it would be the town,
So it'd be like,
and then the department would be the library.
so it would be, so the town is technically getting the grants. If you are under your town, they are getting the money, but then the business name would be your library because you are the one who's going to be using the money. So it would look like this.
Right, so the actual check would be sent to the town and not
Right.
directly to the library.
All right. So then most of you all are going to check this other box right here. If you're a municipality, you would just write municipality. If you have 501c3 status, you would just write 501c3 status, all that kind of stuff. And for the address information here, if you are under the town, you should put the town's information here. And if you are not, then you would put your own information here. This number 4, you don't really need to fill out. Most people, this is not applicable. You don't have to fill this out, and this is not applicable either. And then nobody should be filling out a social security number. That's for individual people. You all should be filling out an EIN, so either for the town if you are under the town, or for your library if you are not. And then if you have Adobe Fill and Sign, you can use that to do this online. Otherwise, you'll either need to just print out this form and fill it all in manually, or fill in this part online, print it out, and then sign it, date it, and then you can scan it and email it back in. And we're going to talk about some of the ways to return paperwork here in a little bit. I see there's a question in the chat. Is it about W-9s?
Yep.
I don't want to get out of this screen and then lose. So if somebody could read out the question in the chat.
So, Moortown Library asks, is Adobe Fill and Sign something you have to pay for? And the answer is the newest version, or the relatively new versions of Adobe Reader come with Fill and Sign now. So as long as you're up to date on Adobe Reader, which is free, you should be able to use Fill and Sign, which is a digital signature.
Okay. Is that the only question?
That is the only one I'm seeing right now. Yep.
Okay. So let's skip on to the next document that all grant recipients are required to submit, and that is a certificate of insurance. I'm going to pull up a sample of which one of those looks like. And Susan, I'll let you make any comments about that.
Right. So you should already have the insurance coverage either through your library or through your town. So we're not asking you to buy additional insurance, just to provide proof through the certification that the library or town is insured. It's just standard occurrences. And the one thing I do want to bring your attention to is at the bottom where it says certificate holder, you should name the state of Vermont as an additional insured through this. And it just basically protects the state if they're a named party in any action. Yeah, so pretty standard, and you wouldn't fill out the form. You would ask your insurance agent to provide the form to you, and then you can forward it to us. So basically,
and those folks who are under the town, your insurance is usually through the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So the form will look sort of like this, but it'll have Vermont League of Cities and Towns in the corner. Those are ones that we see quite often.
right.
I think there are questions in the chat.
Yeah, so a quick question in the chat. Glenna asks, is insurance the same or different for virtual performances?
That's a great question. And that is something I'm going to research. However, if your library is intending on applying for a career grant or any of that sort of stuff, it's just good for us to have this on file anyway. No, I can't imagine that the insurance would be that different if it was a virtual performance, especially if their performer is in their own house or doing something like that. It's just good for us to have this on file anyway, but we will do a little bit of additional research on that. All right. Any other questions?
That's it for the chat at the moment.
Okay. All right. So we are a little bit behind, so we're going to go a little bit quicker through those other ones. So another thing that we ask folks to submit every year is the grantee information form. So I'll go quickly through this first part, and then I'll let Susan explain some of the less obvious things. So once again, grantee name would be the library if you are not under the town, and it would be the town if you are. And then the business name would be the name of your library. So it is mimicking the W-9 in that way. Mailing address, physical address, if it is different, contact info. We like to have the library director's contact info here, just for other grants, etc. We have it all on file. The EIN, same number from your W-9, which we already talked about. The DUNS number is not on the W-9, and I'm going to let Susan explain that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so a DUNS number, it's actually a federal reporting requirement, which this particular grant does not use federal funds, but all of our forms require that DUNS number. You should already have one. There's several websites that you can go and look up your DUNS number. And once again, if you're under your town, you would look it up under your town, or if you're under your library, it would be under your library. Yeah.
And then the fiscal year end month, if you are under the town, you would use their fiscal year end month, and if you are not, then you would use your own fiscal year end month. There are some questions about accounting procedures, and these help us fill out the pre-risk assessment. So I'll let Susan kind of quickly go through these questions.
Sure. So as Jennifer mentioned, we do a risk assessment before we issue a grant, and they're just basic questions on your particular library, and we just need to know, you get everything is assigned values based on whether or not you have, say, on your accounting system, if it's automated or manual or some sort of combination. So we really do need you to fill out all these questions, and if they're not filled out, I'm going to have to reach out to you to to get the additional missing information. So the more you can put on this questionnaire, the smoother it'll go for you.
Yeah. And if you do have questions, I would reach out to Susan before you submit it, rather than just like not answering the question when you submit, because that will just save a little bit of time for us in the end.
Right.
And then this talks about the pre-risk assessment a little bit, and then there's again, if you have Adobe, and you can do fill and sign, you can do that there and then fill out this other stuff normally. If not, you can print this and then sign it, scan it, and email it, all of that kind of good stuff. I'm going to not answer questions right now and go through the rest of these documents, and then we will come back to it because we are getting close to our end time here. All right. So this document should look very familiar to you. This is our standard grant agreement. This first part here, these first 2 pages are all we are going to need back from you. And actually this year, there's going to be something a little bit different called e-sign, which we will talk about in a second. So you are actually not going to have to fill out all of this stuff this year. Susan is going to send you a request to sign through a third-party platform that we'll talk about in a second, and then you will electronically sign it this way, and then it will go to Jason, our state librarian, and then you'll get a copy of the agreement. But you will have this whole thing for your records. This explains all of the terms of the grant, most of which we've talked about already, all of these provisions and dates, etc. And then again, some of the same stuff that we've already talked about. And then this is standard on every single grant agreement. This is language from the state that we have no control over. And then this is what the reporting form is going to look like. So there's a question in the chat about keeping attendance numbers if the performance is virtual. And I think that was the only question I can remember. So this is something we've been wrestling with, and we still need to have a little bit of discussion. This reporting form is not quite finished yet, so we will. This won't probably be in your grant package per se. It will probably be sent out a little bit later. Oh, and I remember the other question, which I will answer when I get to it. So once again, after your performance has happened, you are going to write your town and your library here on this line, just so we know. If you are not under the town, then you don't need to write the town. Then you're going to write your grant number here, and I get this question every year. Your grant number is on your grant agreement, and it's right here. You won't have 2 X's. You will have an actual number, but those haven't been assigned yet. So you will put that here. The amount of grant received, everyone receiving $200, and then you'll fill out all of these sorts of things here. Excess funds means if your performer charged you $175 and you had $25 left over, you would put that here, and you can describe items like books, etc., that you use with excess funds. However, the most excess funds you can spend is $25. This money is meant for performance, not for books, so we try to limit the amount that are not spent on performances. So you really should be trying to spend all of the money on a performance, but if you have $25 or less left over, you can use it on books, etc. This is all standard: name of performer, date, location, type of performance. And then we'll say if you collaborated with other libraries. Now, there was a question about if you collaborated with other libraries, who fills out the paperwork, which is a great question. So every single library is going to have to fill out this Part A right here. Every single library who gets a grant. This Part B, performance receipt, has to be filled out for each performance. So if there were 3 libraries who collaborated on a performance, only 1 library will have to fill this out, and then you will have a place to indicate what other libraries collaborated, so that we aren't getting 3 reports about the same performance. And this is, again, like where we would ask about attendance, so we don't want to triple count the performance. So having only 1 library fill this out, this Part B out, will be really helpful. Keeping track of attendance virtually is going to be tough. If you're doing something like Facebook Live, it does keep track of how many people are watching. It's a little bit easier with things like Zoom because you can see who logs in, etc. But we will give some better guidance on this because we are still doing research on that. And then, as usual, we will have a performer certification section to indicate that they have received money. Doing this electronically could be a challenge, and we might have to pull this out of this report and have it be a separate document. So we will give more guidance on that once we kind of figure out how that's going to work. But we did just want you to have a vision of what it was going to look like. So we do not need receipts this year. This section right here is going to count as a receipt. And hopefully that will cut down on a lot of confusion. Are there any quick questions in the chat?
One quick question is from a little bit back. Do DUNS numbers stay the same each year?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Thank you. And then another question is just something to think about. Zoom tells how many devices are logged on, but not how many people are watching. And that is to some degree an issue of all of the things that are going to track how many viewers you have. And that's something we're going to talk about, but I think there's a good chance the reality is going to be that that's going to be the best number you're going to have. It's going to be very difficult.
And we may have a separate section on the reporting document for virtual performance to kind of take all of those things into consideration. This document was originally created for an in-person performance, so we will try and alter this a little bit to take those things into account. We may just ask how many devices were logged on or something like that. And if you can give more detailed information, that's great. But if not, there are some why I cannot think of the word right now. There are some issues keeping track virtually. So we are taking that into account, and this document will probably look a little bit different when you actually receive it at the end. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, two more quick ones. Do we need to do sub-recipient reports for this? Jan asks.
So you should be submitting the sub-recipient annual report every year anyway. It does affect whether or not you are eligible for this grant. However, you do not need to report this grant on your subrecipient annual report because it uses special funds, not federal funds. The only funds that need to be reported on your subrecipient annual report are federal grant funds. So, for example, the Courier grant uses LSTA money, which comes from the federal government. Which is why that one needs to be reported on that report. But this one does not need to go on your report. However, you do need to have that report filed to be eligible for this grant, just so all of your financial ducks are in a row. That's just a state requirement that we have to abide by.
And then one last question at the moment. For block booking with another library for the same day with the same performer, I'm assuming that just counts as two separate events.
Yeah, so block booking is different because there are two separate performances. This is only, the collaborating part means that 3 libraries all pay for the same performance that is happening one time.
Gotcha. I think that's
Good
it.
Question.
That's it for questions on the chat right now.
Okay. So I'm going to get out of this paperwork and go back into the PowerPoint. So bear with me 1 second. Let's see. Let's see. Sorry, I will be very happy when we are no longer using Skype. All right. Stand by, stand by. Oh, come on. Okay, so oh, here it is. All right. Okay, so we've done this section right here. We're going to really quickly go through the rest of this, and I apologize that we have run over time. So our mail service has been drastically limited because of what is going on. So we are using snail mail as a very, very, very last resort. Currently, almost all VTLIB employees are working from home, so we are not going into the office. And even if we did go into the office, like I said, the mail has been cut back. USPS is obviously still delivering things, but we don't get our mail from them. We get them from our own state of Vermont mail people. So we are asking you to do everything in your power to return things electronically, and I'm going to quickly talk about some of those options here. So as you saw before in the form, those that were PDFs in Adobe, you can complete everything in Adobe with a fillable form and then use fill and sign and then just email it to Susan. That's one option. You can also complete everything in the form, print it out, sign it, and then scan it back. That's another option. If you don't want to type in anything or for some reason you can't, you can print out the form, write it in, scan it, and email it back. The other option, which is new and which in my opinion is not ideal, but considering everything is okay, there are some apps on the smartphone where you can scan documents, and rather than it being a photograph of a document, which is not acceptable, it's actually like you are scanning it on your computer. So I'm not going to go too much into this, but you will get this PowerPoint that will have these links. This is how to use some capabilities your iPhone already has to do this. And then here we have 2 articles about apps that you can download. And there are free apps that do this, so you shouldn't have to pay everything, where you can scan documents and then email them. So if you have any questions about that, you can let us know after you take a look at some of these links. In my experience, most of you do have scanners, so this will really only be for those folks who don't have scanners or cannot get access to a scanner. All right, so I'm going to keep moving forward. So a quick thing about electronic signatures. This only applies to the grant agreement, which Jason, the state librarian, will also have to sign. So you will get an email from this third-party platform, called OneSpan. It will ask you to follow some instructions to sign, in quotes, electronically sign the document and date it. And then once you do that, it will be sent to Jason to also electronically sign. And then at the end, Susan will get a copy of the executed agreement, and you will get a copy of the executed agreement. So this is going to be one way of having folks, one less thing for you to send back to us, try to scan, all that kind of stuff. You will just have to do this special electronic signature. We can't do this for the other documents because nobody else signs them but you, so it wouldn't really work. Okay. Any final questions? And I once again apologize for going over time.
Oh, here's a question.
Yeah, so your director should be signing all of the grant documents. That's just the procedure. Yeah, your director should be signing all grant documents.
Hi, this is Susan. If I could add to that, so the library's director would sign. An assistant or an admin, if you would like to receive a copy of the executed grant, if you let me know and give me your email address, I can include you in it. And you'll also receive a copy of it. So I just need to know, and I'm happy to do that for you.
Thank you, Susan. All right. So I have two final reminders. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a little bit, and all of this information will be included in the follow-up email. Here's Susan's email, Jonathan, and my email. So Susan is your expert on all things paperwork. So all of the paperwork we just talked about, you are going to be sending it to Susan. If you have questions, Susan's going to be the one to answer them. So please reach out to her. She is such a nice lady, and you will be friends, and it will be great. If you have general questions about summer reading or putting on a program, that's something you want to reach out to Jonathan. If it's a basic question, I can answer it too. So that would be the things that we would cover. And then if it's a technology-related question, you can head over to Josh, whose information is right here. One thing I want to say before we get off here is that we see a lot of collaboration between libraries on some of our listservs and not as much on others. So we really encourage youth services librarians and for those one-person libraries who are dealing with youth services things to use VTLIB, which is our youth services listserv. Pick each other's brains, reach out and ask questions. There are some things that we at the department can't do, like make recommendations for performers, or programs, or books, or things like that. Well, we can sometimes recommend books, but we're not allowed to recommend products or people, basically. So that's a great way to use the listserv. So if you are not signed up for VTLIB, email Josh at his at joshua.muse@vermont.gov. He will sign you up for the listserv, and he will have instructions about how to post on the listserv too, I think, if you're new. And we can also put those instructions in the follow-up email in case you are on VTLIB but just don't remember how to post. We really want to encourage folks to use that. For some reason, it seems like I'm the only person posting on it sometimes, which is not ideal.
Yeah, we encourage you all to use it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was seconding that we are encouraging everyone to use the listserv. And then
Jonathan
when you were done,
wants you to use it too, so do it.
Yeah.
And then the last reminder that Jonathan mentioned earlier is that we are going to be doing a webinar on May 4th that is going to be focused on summer reading generally, and especially virtual considerations and summer reading considerations, thinking about everything that's going on. So I think most of you are probably already signed up because we had a ton of people signed up already. But if you haven't, you can go to this link on the slide here, and that will also be in the email, and sign up for that. That's going to be a really good discussion. And I will, if anybody has anything else to add, I will stop talking, and Susan, Josh, or Jonathan can jump in.
I also have one unrelated thing. That's kind of unrelated but related, which is, I'm actually going to turn on my video for a second. So on top of everything else that's happening, the census is happening. It is still happening, and it is important. And there, some of you may, let's see if I can, it will let me. There we go. So we have a book that we got a few copies of, a picture book. Let's see if I can do this. Here we go. Can you see me? Hello? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we have a few copies of this book, and some of you may have already got copies of it. It is related to the census, and we were going to offer some kind of a training and offer some copies to people. And we have 5 that we can send out to people. We have 5 copies of it. It is a kind of a long, and it has a lot of information in it, but it would be a good starting point for a conversation about census. So what we're going to do, basically, if you would like a copy of this, you can just send it. This is going to be like the giveaway part of this webinar. Just send your name and your branch or your library if you're interested. It is called Tricking the Tallyman by Jacqueline Davies, and sort of the intro to it is basically how many people live in your house? How many people live on your street? Could you count them all? What if you had to count everyone in your whole city or town? Could you do that? Well, see that fellow over there? The one who's drooping in his saddle? Take a closer look, dear reader, because he is a tally man. Brave and determined, get his count. A rather tricky task, as you're about to discover. So if you'd like a copy of that.
And I think it takes place in Vermont, right, Jonathan?
I believe that it does. It's either, yes, I think it does. I don't know if it specifically mentions Vermont.
Tunbridge, apparently. It's in Tunbridge.
Yeah, where's Tunbridge?
Tunbridge, not too far from us.
Okay, we have one taker of the book. Excellent. So anyone else?
Oh, and I just got an email, so
Yeah. Great. Well,
thank you to everyone who's interested.
We will take the first 5, and we will figure out how to get them sent to you. The mailroom is still somewhat operational, so we will get them. And thank you so much for participating. And yeah, again, please join us on May 4th for a discussion about summer reading. And keep up all the good work.
And we only have 5 copies?
I have 5 copies right now. If we can dig up more, if we get more names, we'll figure out exactly how many we have.
Okay.
So we'll start with 5 names.
All right. So just send me an email. I have up to Jaquith in the chat. Don't put any more in the chat because I don't know how long this will exist for. Just send me an email. But I will keep track of who just posted in the chat. All right, thank you so much to everyone who attended today. I will be sending out a follow-up email shortly with some of the things I mentioned. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. There are some things that we are still working on, so we may not be able to have an answer for you right the very second you email, but we will look into it and get back to you as soon as we can. So thank you so much to everyone who came today. Stay in touch, and I hope you have a great weekend. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. I look forward to working with you.